Hi, I'm Peter Maher, owner and founder of Liquid Intelligence. In this mini documentary, we're excited to introduce you to our Liquid Intelligence 600 Super Soluble Oil Radiator Coolant, an innovative solution specifically designed for vintage and classic cars built between 1910 and 1960. Cooling systems from that era often struggle with the demands of today's traffic, but our advanced oil-water emulsion coolant addresses these inefficiencies by dramatically lowering engine temperatures. If you're passionate about preserving the performance and rust-free integrity of your classic car's cooling system while protecting it from overheating, this is the solution you've been searching for. We'll show you exactly how it works and why you should seriously consider using it. Introducing Liquid Intelligence 600 Vintage and Veteran Super Soluble Oil Radiator Coolant, drawing inspiration from a traditional coolant formula used by past generations. We've meticulously reformulated it with modern cutting-edge coolant technology, a combination of old and new. The result is a coolant that offers exceptional protection and defense against overheating and corrosion, while maintaining and preserving the long-term integrity of your vintage car's cooling system. I've been in the business of manufacturing radiator coolants for decades, and I've always been fascinated by the idea of using a soluble oil in water emulsion as a coolant base. Unlike glycol-based coolants, which can gradually cause metal to deteriorate through chemical or electrochemical reactions, an oily liquid, chemically inert with very low conductivity, seemed perfect to me for protecting vintage and early classic cooling systems from corrosion. But basic corrosion protection is just one aspect of what a coolant needs to deliver. This time-tested, century-old soluble oil base has provided a dependable and chemically stable foundation for more advanced modifications. And after extensive development and testing, we've refined it with modern innovations that significantly boost both corrosion protection and heat dissipation. Extensive laboratory work and analytical testing, detailed on our website, demonstrate that this reformulated coolant we call Liquid Intelligence 600 surpasses the performance of all non-glycol-based coolants, and even many glycol-based ones. The reformulated product offers numerous compelling benefits, making it an ideal choice, particularly for early classic and vintage vehicles. This innovative coolant provides long-term, highly efficient corrosion protection, along with exceptional antifreeze and anti-boil properties. It is completely eco-friendly, non-toxic and glycol-free. Its superior thermal conductivity and anti-corrosion qualities have been achieved through a blend of soluble organic oils, modern heat-dispersing nanoparticles, and a range of specific long-life corrosion inhibitors. Specifically formulated for classic and vintage vehicles, this coolant is designed to optimize the performance of older, under-engineered cooling systems that are often pushed to their limits in today's traffic. It's particularly effective for vehicles with rust-compromised cooling systems, significantly improving their heat transfer efficiency. This distinctive milky-colored coolant also provides exceptional long-term corrosion protection, outperforming modern glycol-based and water-based alternatives. Perfectly suited for cars, trucks, tractors and equipment with low or no pressure pumped or thermo-siphoning cooling systems, it has been expertly tailored for vehicles manufactured between 1910 and 1960. One of the most common design flaws in classic and vintage vehicles is their inadequate cooling systems, making them especially vulnerable to overheating in today's traffic. Owners of these vehicles are all too familiar with the anxiety of driving in warmer summer months, turning some club runs and weekend cruises into stressful experiences. The unique thermodynamic properties of this coolant can help offset the effects of rusty cooling systems and compensate for original design flaws, effectively eliminating many overheating issues. Here's how it works. Most vintage and classic vehicles have inadequately engineered cooling systems and small insufficient water pumps with very low flow rates, and are notorious for constantly overheating in slow-moving traffic. While these inadequate cooling systems and low flow rate water pumps may have been adequate in cooler climates, they struggle with the Australian summer heat and today's traffic congestion. Vintage cooling systems in today's traffic require a higher thermal conductivity coolant to compensate for their low volume circulation rates. Thermal conductivity measures a coolant's ability to transfer heat over a given flow rate. The higher the thermal conductivity, the less flow rate is required to remove the same amount of heat compared to coolants with lower thermal conductivity. Liquid Intelligence 600 has more than twice the thermal conductivity or heat transfer capabilities of standard glycol and water-based coolants, making it ideal for old, inefficient cooling systems. Consider this analogy. Imagine a little person with a bucket, whose sole purpose is to keep a car running at its normal temperature and prevent it from overheating. They need to continually collect buckets of hot coolant from the engine and dump them through the radiator. The higher the thermal conductivity of the coolant, the less effort this little person has to exert compared to using coolants with lower thermal conductivity. Now imagine that this image represents a modern cooling system, utilizing a standard glycol-based coolant. Whilst glycol can increase the boiling point of a coolant in a pressured cooling system, it has a low heat transfer efficiency or low thermal conductivity. So, to compensate for the lack of heat transfer efficiency, our little man has to run to increase the flow rate between the radiator and engine to maintain the vehicle's correct running temperature. This is easily achieved with a modern cooling system, as contemporary pumps can deliver more than double or even triple the flow rate of classic and vintage models. Now imagine that this image represents a vintage cooling system that was designed in an era when today's traffic conditions were impossible to imagine. At low speeds in stop-and-go traffic, vintage vehicles tend to overheat due to limited airflow, trapped heat and slower moving coolant, where the inefficient water pumps struggle to keep up. To illustrate the inefficiency of these old cooling systems, imagine this little man moving slowly between the engine and radiator, dumping his buckets of hot coolant. So, to help prevent overheating in such a system, we would need to compensate for the lack of flow with a coolant that has a great deal more thermal conductivity than traditional glycol-based coolants can provide. Liquid Intelligence 600 can provide more than twice the heat transfer efficiency, making this coolant the most effective choice for these old, poorly designed and inefficient vintage cooling systems. It's interesting to note that ethylene glycol, developed in the 1850s, was first used as an automotive radiator antifreeze in 1926. Over time, it replaced methanol-based antifreeze products, which were flammable and less effective. Initially, ethylene glycol was recommended only for winter use due to its corrosive properties, which could damage cooling systems if left in place for extended periods. Additionally, it was not recommended for summer use, as it did not improve the anti-boil capabilities of low or no pressure vintage cooling systems. In fact, glycol-based coolants have lower thermal conductivity compared to water, making water a more efficient choice as an anti-boil agent. Studies have since shown that ethylene glycol naturally degrades slowly in the presence of oxygen and high temperatures, conditions typically found in any cooling systems. During this degradation, several acidic byproducts are formed, including glycolic, formic, acidic, and oxalic acids. These acids can rapidly corrode metals found in cooling systems such as copper, brass, steel, cast iron, and aluminium. To mitigate this issue, coolant manufacturers began adding alkaline chemicals to their formulas to maintain the correct pH as these acidic byproducts formed. And by the late 1950s, effective blends of corrosion inhibitors were also incorporated into ethylene glycol-based coolants to reduce or slow their corrosive characteristics, making them the dominant automotive coolant internationally accepted by most vehicle manufacturers. However, ethylene glycol-based coolants were also found to be highly conductive electrolyte solutions. As such, they acted as both catalysts and conductors between anodic and cathodic metals in early automotive cooling systems, thereby causing galvanic corrosion. This issue was soon acknowledged as a significant concern by the automotive industry. Consequently, after the 1960s, vehicle manufacturers began designing cooling systems with anodic and cathodic metals positioned to avoid close proximity to each other, thus reducing the susceptibility to galvanic corrosion. Despite advancements in coolant formulations and cooling system design, most vehicles manufactured before the 1960s remained prone to galvanic corrosion when using ethylene glycol-based coolants. Here is a good example of why that is the case. Consider this well-made vintage 1940s cast aluminium water pump with a copper impeller. Cast aluminium, being an anodic metal, has very low nobility and is less resistant to galvanic corrosion, while copper, a cathodic metal, has high nobility and is more resilient to galvanic corrosion. This wasn't a problem when the vehicle used water or soluble oil as a coolant, as they both had very low conductivity. However, after the vehicle started using ethylene glycol-based antifreeze, which is a highly conductive electrolyte solution, galvanic corrosion damaged this 80-year-old water pump within a few months. Liquid Intelligence 600 Classic and Vintage Radiator Soluble Oil has about 80 times less conductivity than coolants containing a solution of ethylene glycol. In conclusion, the extremely low electrical conductivity and twice the heat transfer efficiency make Liquid Intelligence 600 the ultimate coolant choice to help prevent all types of corrosion and overheating in vehicles manufactured between 1910 and 1960. If you're thinking about using this unique coolant, we strongly encourage you to reach out to our technical support team. This consultation is an essential part of our service, enabling us to address your specific overheating concerns and ensure that Liquid Intelligence 600 will deliver optimal performance for your vintage vehicle. You'll benefit from personalised assistance from one of our highly qualified technical experts, many of whom bring over 40 years of industry experience. Our team is available to support you from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week,